If you're receiving Social Security, you may be wondering whether your monthly check could be noticeably higher in 2027. Some current projections have pointed toward an increase that could translate into roughly $75 more per month for certain retirees. And if you're living on Social Security, that kind of increase can sound meaningful. An extra $75 a month would be about $900 over a full year. But before you start adding that money to your 2027 household budget, there's one important thing to understand. The 2027 Social Security COLA has not been officially announced yet, so that $75 figure is not a guaranteed increase. It's an illustration of what a particular COLA percentage could mean for certain benefit amounts. And the final percentage will depend on inflation data that has not yet been fully collected. That's important because Social Security does not simply look at grocery prices, gasoline prices, or the overall inflation number you may hear on television, and then decide on a raise. There is a specific formula, and once you understand that formula, the uncertainty around the 2027 number starts to make a lot more sense. So let's take this one step at a time. Imagine a retiree named Linda. Linda receives $2,000 a month in Social Security. If the eventual COLA were 3.75%, for example, her increase would be about $75 per month. That would bring her monthly benefit to approximately $2,075 before considering any other changes that could affect what actually reaches her bank account. But notice something important here. We're using 3.75% only as an example. We're not saying that 3.75% is the official 2027 COLA. It isn't. The actual COLA is calculated later, using a specific measure of inflation called the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, commonly shortened to CPIW. That sounds complicated, but the basic idea is fairly simple. The Social Security Administration looks at changes in prices during a particular period and uses those numbers in its COLA formula. And for the 2027 adjustment, the key inflation data comes from the third quarter of 2026. That means the number can still move as the remaining data comes in. So if you've seen headlines suggesting a particular 2027 COLA percentage right now, think of that number as an estimate, not a promise. This distinction matters because retirees sometimes make an understandable mistake. They see a projected percentage, multiply it by their Social Security check, and begin planning around that larger amount. But until the official calculation is complete, the projection can change. And there's another detail that many people overlook. Not every retiree would receive an extra $75. Your dollar increase depends on the size of your current benefit. For example, if someone receives $1,500 a month, a 3.75% increase would be about $56.25. Someone receiving $2,000 would see about $75, and someone receiving $2,500 would see about $93.75. Same percentage, different dollar increase. That's why saying Social Security is going up $75 can be misleading. A COLA is a percentage increase, not a flat $75 payment that every beneficiary receives. And this is one of the most important things to keep in mind as we follow the 2027 update. The final COLA will be based on the official formula, not on a headline, a social media post, or an early estimate. Now, you may be asking, why does Social Security use this particular inflation measure in the first place? The reason goes back to the purpose of COLA. COLA stands for Cost of Living Adjustment. In simple terms, it's designed to adjust Social Security benefits when the cost of living rises. Since 1975, Social Security's general benefit increases have been tied to changes in consumer prices. So if prices rise, the goal is to increase benefits accordingly. But here's where things get interesting. The inflation number used for Social Security isn't simply the inflation number you see reported in a news story. Social Security's current COLA formula uses the CPIW, and the calculation focuses on specific months of data. That means an inflation report that sounds encouraging or concerning doesn't automatically tell you what your 2027 Social Security increase will be. And this is why the next few months matter. The final calculation depends on the inflation readings used in the third quarter. Once those numbers are available, the Social Security Administration can determine the official COLA. So right now, the responsible way to think about the 2027 increase is this. There may be an increase, but the exact percentage is still being determined. And if your benefit is around $2,000 a month, An increase in the neighborhood of several percentage points could indeed produce something close to $75 more per month. But your actual increase could be higher or lower, depending on the final COLA and your current benefit amount. There's also an important reason not to focus only on the dollar increase. Because when you're retired, what matters isn't simply whether your Social Security check goes up. What matters is how much purchasing power that increase gives you. If your Social Security check rises by $75, but your housing, food, utilities, insurance, and healthcare costs rise by more than that, the extra money may not feel like much of a raise. That's why COLA is better understood as an adjustment designed to help benefits keep pace with inflation, not as a traditional pay raise. And that distinction will become especially important when we look at what could happen to your actual monthly budget in 2027. Because the headline number may say one thing, but the amount you actually have available to spend could look different. And that's where we need to take a closer look next. Now, let's move from the estimate to the part that really matters for a retiree. How could a 2027 COLA actually affect your monthly income? Because when you hear a number like 3%, 3.5%, or 3.75%, it can be difficult to picture what that means in real life. For someone living on a fixed income, percentages don't pay the electric bill. Dollars do. So let's make this practical. Suppose your current Social Security benefit is $1,500 per month. If the eventual COLA were 3.75%, the increase would be about $56 per month. Your new monthly benefit would be approximately $1,556. Now suppose your benefit is $2,000. At the same hypothetical 3.75% COLA, the increase would be about $1,556. 5% COLA, the increase would be about $75 per month. That would bring the benefit to approximately $2,075 per month. And if your current benefit is $2,500, the same percentage would produce an increase of about $94 per month. So you can see why there isn't one universal dollar amount for everyone. The percentage is the same, but the actual increase depends on the size of your benefit. $1,500 benefit, about $56 increase. $2,000 benefit, about $75 increase. $2,500 benefit, about $94 increase. Again, these are examples, not predictions of what your individual 2027 payment will be. And there's another reason your personal experience may differ from what you see in a headline. Your Social Security benefit is only one part of your retirement income. You may also have a pension, a 401k, an IRA, savings, or other sources of income. And some retirees have Medicare premiums deducted directly from their Social Security payments. That means the amount of your Social Security benefit and the amount that actually lands in your bank account are not always the same thing. Let's say, for example, that your Social Security benefit receives a COLA increase. If your Medicare Part B premium also changes, the increase in your net payment could be smaller than the headline COLA might suggest. Net payment simply means the amount left after deductions. And Medicare is one of the reasons we need to be careful when talking about how much more money retirees will actually have available. The COLA and Medicare are separate programs. The Social Security Administration determines the COLA under the Social Security law. Medicare premiums are determined separately, so you should never assume that a $75 increase in your Social Security benefit automatically means $75 more in spendable income. It may, but it depends on your individual situation and any deductions from your benefit. This is especially important for people who depend heavily on Social Security. Imagine Linda again. She receives $2,000 per month. She hears that a hypothetical 3.75% COLA would give her about $75 more each month. That's helpful. But Linda also has Medicare premiums deducted from her Social Security payment. If those deductions change, her actual increase in the amount deposited into her bank account could be different. This doesn't mean the COLA isn't valuable. It simply means retirees should look at the whole picture rather than one number. And there's another question that comes up every year. When will we actually know the official 2027 COLA? This is where the calendar becomes important. The 2027 COLA is based on inflation data from July, August, and September of 2026. Those are the 3 months in the third quarter. The Social Security Administration compares the average CPIW for those months with the corresponding average from the third quarter of the previous year. If the calculated increase is positive, that becomes the basis for the COLA. In other words, the government doesn't simply pick a number. There's a formula behind it. And because September's data is not available until after that month ends, the final 2027 COLA cannot be known with certainty right now. This is why early estimates should be treated carefully. An estimate can be useful. It can give retirees a general idea of what might happen. But it isn't the same thing as an official announcement. Think about it like a weather forecast. If the forecast says there's a 60% chance of rain next week, you might bring an umbrella, but you wouldn't tell your friends that it definitely rained. A COLA estimate works in a similar way. It gives you information to watch. It doesn't give you a guaranteed benefit amount. And that distinction becomes particularly important if you're making a retirement budget for 2027. If you're currently receiving Social Security, you might be tempted to build your budget around the highest estimate you've seen. I'd suggest taking a more conservative approach. Use your current benefit as your baseline. Then, when the official COLA is announced, you can update your budget using the actual percentage. That's much safer than assuming an estimate will become reality. Now, here's something else worth understanding. The COLA doesn't apply only to people who are already retired. It can also affect people who are receiving other types of Social Security benefits, including certain people receiving disability benefits. The specific payment situation can vary, but the annual COLA is generally applied to Social Security benefits covered by the adjustment. And this is one reason the annual announcement gets so much attention. For millions of Americans, even a relatively small percentage increase can add up over an entire year. But the reverse is also true. If inflation remains elevated, a COLA that sounds reasonably large may still feel modest when you're paying for everyday necessities. Let's look at a simple household budget. Suppose a retiree receives $2,000 per month from Social Security. Now imagine that a hypothetical COLA increases that benefit by $75. Over 12 months, that's approximately $900 in additional Social Security income. That could help with groceries. It could cover several utility bills. It could help pay for transportation or prescription costs. Or perhaps it simply gives the retiree a little more breathing room each month. And for someone living close to the edge of their budget, that breathing room can matter. But remember, $900 more per year is not the same as $900 more in purchasing power. If the cost of essential expenses rises during the same period, part of that increase may simply offset higher prices. That's the fundamental challenge with inflation. Your check can increase while your financial situation doesn't improve by the same amount. So when you hear about the 2027 COLA, don't ask only, how much bigger will my check be? Also ask, what will my essential expenses look like in 2027? That second question can help you make a much more realistic retirement budget. And there's one more detail that can make a difference for people who receive Social Security and Medicare together. Medicare's annual changes can affect the amount of Social Security income that actually reaches you. That's why, later this year, you'll want to pay attention not just to the official Social Security COLA announcement, but also to information about Medicare premiums and other deductions that may affect your payment. Social Security COLA and Medicare-related deductions. Looking at both gives you a clearer picture of what your monthly income may actually look like. So where does that leave us right now? The $75 example is reasonable as a hypothetical illustration for someone receiving around $2,000 per month if the eventual COLA were 3.75%. But that doesn't mean every retiree will receive $75, and it certainly doesn't mean the 2027 COLA has already been decided. The official number still depends on the required inflation data. And that leads us to the next question. What are the current estimates actually telling us, and how much confidence should you place in them? Because this is where many retirement headlines can become confusing. A projection may change several times before the official number is released. And understanding why those estimates move can help you avoid unnecessary worry or unrealistic expectations. So, let's bring this together. The possibility of $75 more per month in Social Security is worth paying attention to, but it is not a guaranteed 2027 increase. That $75 example assumes a hypothetical 3.75% COLA on a $2,000 monthly benefit. Your actual increase could be different because the final COLA percentage has not yet been determined, and your benefit amount may be higher or lower. The key point is simple. Don't build your 2027 budget around an estimate. Use your current Social Security benefit as your baseline. Once the official COLA is announced, calculate the actual dollar increase and then consider other changes that could affect your net payment, including Medicare-related deductions. And remember, COLA is designed to help Social Security benefits keep pace with rising prices. It doesn't necessarily mean you'll have significantly more purchasing power. So if you're planning for retirement or already living in retirement, keep watching the official information rather than relying on social media predictions or headlines. A few dollars a month can matter when you're on a fixed income, and knowing the real number is much more useful than guessing. When the official 2027 COLA is released, you'll have a much clearer picture of what your Social Security income could look like next year. For now, stay informed, keep your budget realistic, and don't count estimated money before it's official. If you found this explanation helpful, stay with us for more clear and practical Social Security and retirement updates.